Welcome back to Why Blank Lost. I'm David Bloomberg, and with me right after the unsurprising Brittany eviction is, of course, my Big Brother Why Blank Lost co-host, Ovi Kabir.
Hey there, David. Hey, everybody. So happy to be here. And one reason why I'm so happy is that if you have been watching Why Blank Lost throughout this whole season, you knew our predictions. What we put David's prediction was Brittany, and my prediction was Taylor. And who would have thought week one where we would be? But I can still say that the person who, regardless of who wins, who made it farthest, now we know for sure is Taylor. Therefore, I have beat David. So I'm very happy
That's
about that.
true. That is true. Yes, you have one-upped my Survivor co-host
One up.
Jessica, who usually usually her prediction falls before mine, but they also usually fall pretty early. So I'm happy with fourth place here.
It's who I mean, I wouldn't have pegged it for anybody that we would have made it to this point.
Yeah,
So
no
we'll
kidding.
discuss that.
That first week we were like discussing, all right, what are we going to
Oh.
say about why Taylor lost the first week and why Brittany
Mhm.
probably lost the second week,
Back to back.
and so. But yeah, as people heard us say on the Why Alyssa Lost podcast, we weren't sure if we were even going to be able to podcast specifically about fourth place, or we'd have to wait until after the finale to do everyone who was left. But we got it done. We're getting it done just for all of you out there.
Exactly.
Now,
If you can see, I'm traveling at the family house right here, so this
yes.
is why we have a different background and whatnot.
Oh, we
But
know it's a green screen. You're just
it's
taking
great.
us to, yeah,
Exactly.
different.
But we wanted to make it work, so we did.
Yeah, and the fact that Brittany's eviction was telegraphed so far out certainly helped us prepare. I could put together all my notes and everything else. Where sometimes you're like, "Ooh, what's going to happen?" But um, that said, there is still plenty we can say about it. It became pretty clear early on that like we discussed, Brittany, although she was my winner pick, was not going to win. I still had some hopes for second place, but
Mhm.
'twas not to be. To figure out why, we will follow our usual path of looking at all the information about Brittany from TV, live feeds, etc., and then comparing her game to a set of guiding rules for winning I originally wrote in 2004 and have modified ever since with the most recent version at robhasawebsite.com/bigbrotherrules. And then when we're done with that, we'll have some updated finale predictions as well. Now, before we get to the rules, we usually have some other things to discuss about the week in general, and this is certainly no exception. Last week, we discussed Monty and Taylor getting together. This week, we have Monty and Taylor breaking up. Life moves fast on Big Brother sometimes, even when most of the feeds are very slow. Um, but of course,
Exactly.
of course, the real issue is the way Monty went about it, returning to misogynistic jerk mode as he literally mansplained her behavior, her supposed behavior to her, and told her how she is supposed to feel. Taylor, being the incredibly kind and gracious person she is, actually apologized to him and even continued to hang out with him for a while. I hope when she gets out of the house, she sees what a toxic person he really was in this situation. This is not me encouraging people to send stuff to her about that. Let her find out in her own time and way.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've seen time and time again within the Big Brother house, it feels like a compression tank. So time moves so much quicker in there. We saw from really the onset of the relationship or the showmance that happened last week, Audley Tom into the final four. It came really quickly and happened. And now it's ending because all these things, they're so stressed. And I always say there's probably not a good time to start a relationship in the Big Brother house, but I would say end game is probably not it, because this is a time where you probably need to cut your closest allies and getting emotionally attached with them, as well as having such a stressful feeling because round the curve is $750,000. So, but things happen, and so it was just kind of unfortunate to see outside of the gameplay what we saw, where we were hoping that Taylor and Monty essentially had a pretty easy week going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Drama started, and I'm interested to see how this and within the game effects going to the final three. Has something shifted within their allegiance to one another? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It does also answer a question. You'll remember last week we discussed. You said, "Well, this is a showmance making it to the end together," and I said, "No, no, no. There's got to be a cutoff." Well, as it turns out, the showmance doesn't make it to the end together as a showmance. So unless, I mean, they could get back together again for a third time or whatever time it is. He's already moved his stuff out of the room once or twice now, so. Who knows? Who
Who
knows what'll
knows?
happen?
It's almost like, and this is going to be my one football reference I have to do for the cast. Sunday, if you watch the Browns versus Jets game, the Browns were up by 13 points with 2 minutes left, almost a 99% win percentage, and somehow they found a way to lose it to the Jets. So this is the same way I truly thought this showmance was making it to the end. That 99%, and David was the Jets, and he got
Yeah.
the win.
Well, we can thank Monty for that,
Mm-hmm.
for screwing that one up. But yeah, moving away from Monty's behavior and to Turner's, we got to see both on the show and even more on the live feeds the way Turner behaved towards Brittany, just being a complete a-hole, calling her slimy and a snake and all sorts of other things. Why? Because she used his friendship with Alyssa to try to save Alyssa. Mind you, this is the same Turner who has repeatedly and correctly basically cited to Rule 4 and said game and personal should, be separated. But when someone does the same to him, he gets all pouty and even started crying to Taylor and Monty. Oh, boo-hoo.
Okay, I'm gonna be a little less harsh on him because in that moment specifically, all right, I know how David feels, but I do think that Turner was validly frustrated that regardless of whether it's a good game move or whatnot, the frustration still exists for Turner that basically he did vote out, and I'm on the side that he wrongly voted out Alyssa. He shouldn't have done that for his game, and he still did that to get the allegiance of Turner and Taylor and Monty. Brittany then does this whole plan, and now they're both who actually turned on that. So he already voted his alliance, and now it's getting spun on him. Great gameplay potentially by Brittany. I think she needed to sell it more, which we'll talk about. But I think we did see Turner's frustrations about like him making maybe potentially the wrong move and it not paying off. Come to, so I understand the tears when you're like right around 750K, but I will say that I think Brittany should have put it on more. If I was Brittany, I would have been yelling and throwing like, "How could you be lying to me?" But again, we'll get into that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he didn't look at his own actions of voting out his best friend in the house after lying to her repeatedly, saying he'd keep her. You know, and like you said, he screwed up from both a game and personal standpoint. It it does seem like he should be mad at himself, but he's not allowing himself to be mad at himself, so he's taking it out on Brittany.
Yeah. No, I agree. I
Uh,
agree. I think there's that frustrations right there between that internal for what he did and probably the realization that afterwards, if Brittany's going to blame him, this probably wasn't the best move. He should have just gone with her and taken out Taylor.
yeah, yeah. Now, last week we could not do our usual Julie Chen Moonves is wrong about blank segment because Dalton Ross's interview with Julie posted literally while we were recording.
Yeah.
I had the page open and I was refreshing it. And, we were going to do a live. What was she wrong about? But it posted after the last time I refreshed. And so as we are recording now, we're in a similar situation of a new one not being posted yet, but we can look back at last week. What Julie said then wasn't so much factually wrong, like she usually is, as just wrong for someone in her position to say. I discussed this a bit with Jessica on one of our Survivor 43 preview podcasts. We were comparing Jeff Probst and Julie. It just kind of came up. And I even turned that part of it into a TikTok. But what Julie said was, I am not joking when I tell you each week I spent more time and energy trying to figure out what new dance step I was going to do instead of prepping questions for whoever was getting evicted that night. To this, I respond, I am not joking when I say that this does not surprise me one little bit. We've known for a while Julie does not care. Uh, and for her to admit, yeah, I cared more about dance moves than paying attention to the contestants so I could ask them good questions, which also, by the way, maybe I'm surprised she wrote any of the questions herself. Maybe that's why she paid less attention, because someone will write them for me. Some intern will do it. Um, but the part to me that is wrong is her admitting it like this.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to truly make the segment, and in the future too, I little just dub it in one of lost. JDDC, Julie does not care.
Yeah.
Or Julie does not care. JDNC, sorry, not
Yes.
very good with my abbreviations. She simply doesn't, and I think it's so removed from it, so she says whatever, and she knows there's never going to be a backlash, really a true meaningful backlash to hold her and say like, hey, you probably shouldn't do it. So like,
You
why
don't
not?
consider my TikToks enough of a backlash to?
You know what? I think somebody in her production is watching that because they're doubling down to make sure that you have the
That's right.
opportunity to make this segment. But her herself, no, unfortunately, I do not. I don't think Julie watches the episodes by any means, so I
Well,
don't think
yeah.
she gets to the podcast.
I mean, she might watch the episode like on the plane trip, or something like that. But
Yeah, like Cliff Notes, maybe she maybe watches
yeah,
Karen's wrap up. Who knows?
yeah, oh yeah, right. Yeah, there are Julie defenders on TikTok. They come out at me and they're like, "You don't know what you're talking about. Julie is heavily involved in it." Block, you know. So I don't
That
know. Julie's on there under a screen name or
Wow.
something.
I can say within my, my time as a fan, and I have met all forms of fans from each player, from each
Mhm.
person. I have yet to meet this fandom, the Julie Chen Moonves Stan group. So you know what? That's impressive. If somebody can go out to bat for her for Big Brother, maybe for other things I get it, but for Big Brother, oof, that's a
I
dedicated person.
I'd introduce you, but I do believe that I have blocked them.
There could
Not
be a
because
burner
they were
account.
fans, not because they were fans, but because of how they behaved.
Yeah.
So there might be a couple others out there. Anyway, is there anything else you want to discuss before we get to the rules?
No, nothing really that I think we covered most things today. I kind of really wanted, since we're getting to the end thing, I really wanted to focus on Brittany herself and talk about her
Mm-hmm.
game because I actually think this is gonna be a segment where you and me might disagree a little bit. So I'm gonna leave it to some portions there. Um,
Uh-oh.
yeah, I'm
Uh-oh.
gonna save it for because
Okay.
I think this is gonna be fun. We've had a
Okay.
few disagreements on the pod,
Yeah,
but
I
I
know.
think
See, you're using your spyware on my computer again to
I
figure
know, I
out
know.
what I'm
I
going to
already
say.
know the things you're gonna say, so I have counters for them.
Okay. All right. Well, before we get to that, of course, we want to let people know that the rules we're about to discuss, or the Survivor version of them anyway, can be found at www.robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed. I don't know why I put in the www all of a sudden this time, but you can, of course, get the Survivor version of the poster. You can get the poster on a t-shirt. You can get a checklist shirt. You can get a checklist mug, all sorts of things. So again, go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed, and you can find all those things. So with
Love the
that,
mug. I think I really need to truly get one of these things,
okay,
and maybe
yes, we'll get on that.
I'm gonna grab one of those for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, Brittany came into the game as a super fan and quickly connected with fellow superfan Michael. She had ideas, but found it difficult to put those plans into action. Where did she go wrong early, and how did that affect the rest of her game? Was there anything she could have done at Final Four to change Monty's mind? It's time to figure out why Brittany lost. Now, the first and most important rule is, of course, to scheme and plot. Brittany came into the game fully intending to be a strategist, but then was immediately thrown backstage where she talked about having nothing to bargain with. It's hard to even remember backstage, but um, and she lost everything she planned for in the beginning of the game. Little did she know, and she still doesn't know, that at least as of leaving, that she won the fan vote to stay safe that week. But in the meantime, she spiraled and overthought some things, which we'll get to more in the second rule. But that series of events kind of set the stage for a lot of the rest of Brittany's game. She had the intent to scheme, she had the knowledge to plot, but the actual actions involved of doing it tended to elude her for much of the season.
I think, and here's the thing is that what's interesting is that as players within the house, right, we look at them week to week as they play, but also comparatively to their counterparts. So week one, you're compared to people around you, week two, etc. Brittany right now, I would argue, is with comparatively to a lot of past seasons, is with a strong group of four right here. And with this being said, including her, I don't think Brittany played a bad game through this season. I think there are definitely parts missing. I definitely think when we discussed it that she started shooting for a second place win. And when you allied to yourself to kind of a phenomenal player as Michael has been, and a juggernaut that you usually don't see, that when you become their shadow, which works for you, you can work in the stealth, but Michael became so big that his shadows came into the spotlight. So by that definition, we saw Brittany actually be really hindered in certain ways from her own gameplay, but because her allies around her were such good players this season, I truly believe. I believe throughout this week, or not this week, excuse me, through this podcast, I'll be a little higher on Brittany than David might potentially be, because I think that with a little bit more luck and a few more minor decisions from Brittany, we could have definitely seen her win equity a lot more.
Yeah, you probably will be. I will say, when I was done reviewing my notes, I was like, wow, I'm really hard on her. And, I like her. But I I just got to go with
Yeah,
what I see here, Um, to go back to earlier in the game, for example, when she did try to strategize early on, it tended to come as her just dumping all the information she had. In mid-July, as just one example, she approached Joseph and said that although they rarely talk, she wanted him to know that Pooch had been throwing him under the bus. So, hey, maybe we should vote out Pooch. And Joseph said no, and Brittany responded, "Oh, well, okay, if it happens, it's not me." And it was just a weird interaction, and it wasn't good strategizing. And we saw that, like I said, we saw it with Pooch, we saw it against Pooch, we saw it with other people. And then as the game went on, it seemed like every time Brittany talked strategy to someone, it was just overly convoluted. This was, I think, just part of her overall communication issues with other house guests. If she was trying to convey that 2 plus 2 equals 4, she would first go through the derivation of the numeral 2, the history of equations, rounding errors, the definition of what 4 meant, etc.
exactly. I mean, I think we saw. I want to liken her a little bit to, and not all, because they're very different people, but her in how she explains certain things, to kind of how Kyland in Big Brother 23 would explain things, where
Yeah.
he kind of went off on tangents, where he described certain things, and by the end of the conversation, the other person on the other end was kind of confused with the result or what the conversation entailed. And so I think that was, like you said, Brittany is so knowledgeable about the game. She really had a keen eye on things going on in the house, or from her perception. And because of that, I feel like she never understood when to limit and put a little plug in there. I mean, we saw her go kind of full all in on Michael, where she really trusted everything, told every single thing to him, and didn't use that limiter with other people as much, where since she was so free with Michael, she kind of started doing that with other players in the house as well. So I will say, I think that's one thing we did see, and we saw that translate also into her conversations within her goodbye messages, where she really kind of, if she just did a little more copywriting, just
Yeah.
had a second draft, third draft, I think in these conversations, it would have got her process forward better.
Yeah, I like the Kyland comparison. The one difference, I'd say the main difference is, when you were done with a conversation with Kyland, you still had no idea what he had said. when you were done with a conversation with Brittany, you knew what she had said. You just wish she had gotten there in 10% of the time.
It it's
I
like
had,
this could have been an email.
yeah, right. I had some coworkers like that, some employees like that, where it's like, you knew they had something important to tell you, and that was fine. But it took 2 hours in what could have been a 10-minute conversation. And so, I feel like that is kind of Brittany here. Um, so, yeah. And you mentioned, of course, obviously her super tight alliance with Michael. And I do think in many ways that helped her game because he had so much power. He could protect her. Um, but in other ways, it hindered her because she was not used to doing much of the scheming with other players and was seen as being dragged along for much of the time.
I agree. I think the unfortunate thing is that she needed for her own game for Michael to make it closer to the end with her
Mm-hmm.
or get cut earlier than that. Because the issue, what happened was Michael got cut at such a power position that left her now kind of scrambling, figuring out now she needs to play her own game, but also with the realization is that she can't just now carry on to anybody else because she needs to win the game if she wants to. And so she needs to make some moves that kind of differentiate herself from that. So with that in mind, she wasn't able to kind of play a stealth game. She was really keen on turning on her own allies, as we saw last week, which kind of imploded into this week on Taylor. Um, and so because of this, I really truly think that Michael was a positive for a game in a lot of ways, also a negative in certain ways.
Right.
But the worst thing ever was where he went home really didn't give her much room for her to pivot because things were already solidified with others.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned, of course, her alliance with Taylor, which seems to have held all the way till the end, even after Brittany tried to vote her out last week. Taylor really did try to convince Monty to keep Brittany, but he was just never going along with it. And of course, Brittany herself tried to work on Monty this week. She had all sorts of facts and figures on her side, trying to show Monty how many wins they each had and how they did in comps. Turner had flipped on his previous allies and so on, but all to no avail for reasons we'll get to in a bit, probably right around Rule 6.
Yeah, no, I mean, and here's the thing is when she was working with Michael for so long, when they did the scheming so much together, and we didn't really see her as an individual work with Monty and others. Is usually with a
Right.
pair attached with Michael. And here's the issue with that is that she was able to really kind of info dump onto Michael, who then could
Mm-hmm.
translate in a really well and communicated way to Monty and other players to make it truly make sense. Kind of like why you have your back of your house for a program and your front of your house and make things look pretty and want to get the hard work done. And she was doing a lot of the hard work, but to try and make this pretty and convince Monty, she hasn't been doing this throughout the season. And I think this kind of comes back to kind of a pivotal reason we saw with Brittany, which I don't think was the end all be all for her because we've seen other players amass that hurdle, but was a communication of certain things to make it a little bit more
Yes.
translatable.
Yes, exactly. Now, Brittany did try putting in some good work at Final Five to keep Alyssa, or at least turn her from Turner. But we mentioned last week that she went about it in the wrong way. The whole sympathy vote thing was always going to be a non-starter. Turner would have needed to be a complete fool to fall for that, like Daniel level clown to fall for that. Um, you know, I'm not sure if logic would have worked better because Monty just had his hook so firmly in Turner, but I do feel it would have at least kind of given a little bit better shot.
Yeah, I think one thing, and maybe if I missed this too from last week, correct me, but I think what would have happened if they were much more upfront with Turner, and if Alyssa and Brittany came to Turner, essentially said one version is that like, hey, we're both going to take you to the end, there's no matter what. Like this is our plan for it. Convinced him there, whether it was true or not. I think Alyssa probably
Right.
would have done that. And Brittany think she probably would have taken Turner over Monty or Taylor actually if they were able to convince him that as a duo and that he's now solidified, because I think the reason he felt so close to Monty was Monty did show him some sort of allegiance by not trying to
Mm-hmm.
get him out. But in the same breath, he didn't feel like he had that true allegiance with anybody else. And with Alyssa, he did. And that's what we argue why he shouldn't have thrown her away. But he didn't feel like she had an ability to win competitions that would help
Right.
him out. So yeah, I think she didn't go around the right way to convince him. And again, I really think she needed to double down this week when basically she was caught in her lie, and she needed to convince him that Turner was as untrustworthy as possible. That, like, what benefit would it be to get out Taylor, and what benefit would it be to get out Alyssa?
Mm-hmm.
Look at the game. Convince Monty to turn against Turner early on and sell that lie. And unfortunately, she chose to be the villain, by doing that. And I like that. I like that she did
Yeah.
that. But she needed to sell it and go prime villain.
Yeah. Yeah. I like what you said about getting together with Alyssa and going to Turner, because that was one thing that Turner had going on. Was he was telling Brittany one thing. He was saying, yes, I'm absolutely voting Alyssa out. He was telling Alyssa, I am absolutely keeping you. If he had found out that the two of them talked and that Alyssa knew what was going on and he couldn't keep up this facade anymore, maybe that would have cracked him, because maybe that, as much as he says, I want to keep emotions separate, maybe her breaking down in a conversation with him you know, would have cracked him a little bit. But yeah, they stayed separate and tried this whole sympathy vote thing, and the two attacks from different sides. They should have come together as a single force.
Exactly. And I mean, you break down the numbers too right here. So right now you have Taylor, Turner, had Brittany, and Monty, those four, all
Mm-hmm.
right? For Turner right here, he already knows Taylor and Monty, and he can see it, and they're kind of the showmans at that point. They're getting together. They are tight. He's only really tight with Monty at this point, not through Taylor at all. She's
Right.
gonna always choose somebody other than him. If he instead gets out Taylor, and in this situation this week, he would have had Brittany, himself, Alyssa, and Monty. He truly is the connector between all of them, and potentially Brittany more to Alyssa.
Mm-hmm.
But Monty now has no person to rely on other than him. Alyssa will go to him, and then he probably can convince Brittany. He's in so much of a better position. And the reason we're talking about this in Turner's situation is because it directly reflects to Brittany, because she could have made that happen.
Well, she might have been able to make that happen. She could have done
Might
better
have been.
work to.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that Turner would go with her instead of Monty, but um, at least she would have had a better chance.
She would have a better chance. Yeah, that's true.
So, all right, well, we could go to the second rule, which says not to scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. Now, in the first rule, I mentioned that she spiraled during the backstage twist, um, and that caused her to start having problems here in the second rule. She got it into her head that since Pooch was the backstage boss, he might be the one who picked which backstager could be in jeopardy. So she tried to convince him that she was on his side by telling him how Amira had thrown out his name. But the problem was he clearly wasn't interested in aligning with her. I mean, I know this is going way back, but I can still see the look on his face as he just kind of is like, why is this woman even talking to me? Um, and yet she didn't take the hint. She kept going. And she even later, looking back, described her own gameplay as messy. That and some other issues led to Brittany becoming a target as they moved into later July because she was seen as scheming too much. Brittany was upset because she said, well, others can do it, but when she did, it was scrutinized. Yeah, but what she missed was she did it too much and she got caught over and over again. At one point, Amira called her out on it, and they ended up talking through it. But even so, when Amira was voted out, she described Brittany to Mike Bloom as confused, goes behind your back. I never trusted Brittany. I would probably say liar.
Yeah, I think we just saw Brittany unfortunately really play the game in certain ways with her heart on her sleeve. And I really think sometimes it can be a good way to do that, where she is so transparent, everybody knows it, and there's a level of transparency that goes into where I love that, and it goes moves to like she is like one quirky. She's working with us. She just is kind of messy. Versus she's messy, where it's the game stylist. And so I think that's what we unfortunately saw. We really saw her panic a lot, and instead of taking a breath to not panic as much, she kind of tried to overdo it, over scheme, went to talk to people, try to reiterate certain connections that she didn't build up to that point. And so ultimately, here's the thing is that I don't think this is much of an issue on a lot of different seasons potentially with Brittany, because you'll have other players scramble like this. But we saw, honestly, as the weeks went back forward, on and on and on, you had less dramatic players taken out of the house. You had a little bit more level headed going into this. And so it kind of had her stick out. I mean, like, look at the boot order of who went out,
Yeah.
and each of the people were part of the drama, dramaticness, and most seasons it's the reverse. So you're able to get away with that type of stuff, I feel like. But as the game went on, Brittany seemed like the most paranoid.
Yeah. I mean, her messiness continued on and off through the season. She came in saying she was a casual fan who got into the game during the pandemic. Within a couple weeks or so, she admitted to Jasmine and Alyssa that she fibbed and had watched since season one. Okay, why? She lied about her job, saying she was a toy tester instead of a hypnotherapist. I can only surmise that she worried people were going to think she was hypnotizing them or something, but it just made things awkward for her. She slipped up a couple times, such that people were suspicious. And then, of course, it gave Michael ammunition when he, took his no holds barred approach to trying to stick around at the double eviction because she had told him the truth. It just made her seem sketchier to people who were already inclined to distrust her.
Yeah, I think you have to have a level of vulnerability with the people that you're with there, and every lie needs to be sold with a grain of truth. And she unfortunately, in certain ways, like, here's the thing is, I always think it's kind of weird with the career changes that people have. I think there's certain careers that you might not want, you want to stay away from in the Big Brother house, because there's such a connotation. Lawyer, people are always going to think you're going to, be able to talk initial game,
Mhm.
cop, they're going to be able to surmise this. But like, I really think there's a level of, if people are going to distrust you in a certain way. So when you say you're a toy, if I heard anyone tell me in the Big Brother house that they make toys or they like sell toys, I wouldn't believe them. I think that would just be some sort of lie in there. So regardless of if they're like telling the truth, I'm not gonna trust them regardless. So might as well tell certain truths that you can get away with, and it helps build up the trust. And I think that's a major thing of her thing. She didn't build up the trust factor really well throughout the game.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, if we fast forward to the week of Michael's HOH, I'm sorry, his last HOH, I got to specify. Um, we saw Brittany once again going a bit crazy with over scheming and oversharing. In her mind, I think she was doing it because she worried that some of the others were saying if they couldn't get Michael, they'd get her.
Mhm.
And yeah, she was right about that. Um, but because she was, again, too convoluted in her discussions, things just got all tangled up. She sort of made a deal with Turner, but then she denied it to Monty, um, who, of course, trusted Turner more. She overdid everything so much that word got even back to even Michael, and he
Mhm.
distanced himself from her somewhat, also making him less inclined to listen to her when she was actually giving him good information about how close Turner and Monty were.
Yeah, we just saw her with this scrambling. Unfortunately, it's kind of like the boy who cries wolf. That there were so many instances where they felt like she scrambled too much, that when she was telling the direct truth, that she wasn't able to have that belief on her side. Um, yeah, I mean, that week was tough for her. And again, I think it happens that she had people with her who were really kind of like, I mean, Monty has always been. I'm trying to say explain is not the right word, but people have talked about Monty as being cool like water in a lot of situations. Maybe not this week as much, but he's collective in certain ways. All these other players, they seem level headed in a certain way, so they respect that level headedness when they come with approach. Brittany, the way she explains things, is not truly in the most level headed way. It's logical, but like you said, it takes a lot to get there. So
Right.
she started to stick out like a sore thumb in certain ways.
Yeah. All right. Well, we could go to the third rule, which talks about the need to be flexible. Through most of the game, we've already talked about it and everybody's seen it. Brittany was locked in with Michael to the point of being willing to accept second place to him. So she wasn't exactly being flexible at that point. Once she realized he was going to be a target, I think part of her thinking and talking to Turner and Monty was trying to give herself some options for when the inevitable happened and Michael was taken out. But it was just too little, too late for her. Everybody knew where she stood, and she hadn't really talked to them much before because Michael did so much of the talking. So she didn't really have anywhere to go.
All right, so I think this is going to be one of the points where I think we disagree a little bit, because I think that I do agree with you that she was close to Michael in a lot of ways. I've been critiquing that, but I do think as a player she did really well in this rule because her flexibility throughout the game. She was a target initially or somebody who was truly left out. She found partners in Taylor and Michael. Then she was able to find her way into the leftovers. She also was included in certain alliances, even with whether I believe it was the girl's girl she was included with,
She
kind of.
was, in theory, she was included. Was she really? I would say
No,
no.
not really. And
But
here's the
yeah.
thing: is like I think what's impressive is like the level of autonomy that she started to gain as the game went through. Again, it was through her alliances and sometimes not through herself. But we did see her kind of figure out different ways, and she was willing. We heard on the feeds that she wanted to cut Michael eventually. Knew she had to win the game. Whether she went through it or not, unsure.
I mean,
But
she
when
said that, but at other times she said she was willing to accept second place to him.
Yeah, exactly. But I just feel
You
like
know.
we couldn't just see until the end. I still, while she was playing a second place game in a lot of ways, but when Michael came out, when he was evicted the first chance,
Mm-hmm.
she really was maybe a little too flexible. What we could say is that she went against Taylor really quickly because she felt like that's the play, because she saw the way it was turning. This week she was trying different maneuvers, so I really don't think from my side when I look at her game, I can fault her for how she played the game in a flexibility role because she really went with how the dices were rolled. I can't see any moments, maybe I'm wrong, but where it made a clear decision of her changing an alliance one way or the other.
Yeah,
If
I
she,
just think that, getting locked in with one person, no matter how good that one person
yeah,
is, she just, she didn't, I mean, yeah, she had Taylor. So, I mean, that's good. She just, once Michael was gone, so much of the foundation of her game was ripped away from her.
yeah, and I
Um,
agree. But I do think that is probably comes in play from the other rules of her not being able to kind of one keep her emotions to herself in certain ways, which we'll get to the scheming, plotting. I don't know. She did try to be flexible, but it was again too late. So
yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it was the other parts that delved into that. But
Okay. Well, we can go ahead to that rule you were just talking about because the fourth rule says players should not allow their emotions to control them. Brittany can certainly be an emotional person at times. The question is whether those emotions interfered with her game. So, what do you think about that?
I think there's not much of a rock to stand on to say that they actually really truly affected her game because her emotions were so visible that other house guests got I don't want to use the word disturbed by it, but it changed the way they felt about her in different situations, from the whole her scrambling, thinking that she on when Michael won HOH that she could be a potential target, where she really like showed it to everyone how she felt fear. And that's the thing, is like you have to stay as cool as a cucumber, because the moment you show that you're worried and fearful about something, then it confirms in other people's heads that they should be scared of you or they should go after you because they think you're a target, etc. Too, going into this when Michael was out, her literally the first half of the week where she was just like, oh man, I can't believe Michael would say all that. That's horrible. Like, just kind of putting the game aside and saying it's all emotions, but then also turning around like, this is for you, Michael. I want
Yeah.
this to be good. It's confusing to the house guests of where you stand. And I don't think it's a good look.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think part of her emotional situation came about because of the reason, or at least a reason, she was playing the game, for her and her husband to be able to afford having or adopting a baby. And I think, well, we know she certainly got emotional at times. Even later in the game, she was upset with the others having a slumber party without her because she went to bed at 2 and they stayed up till 8, and she was getting all mad about that. Now, did it affect anything in the game? No, not really. But It's just one more thing, and I, I just, I don't know that there were specifically moves she either made or didn't make because of it, but the emotions were definitely there.
I agree, and I think one thing it's when you're trying to explain something logically to somebody, and regardless of how good your points are coming across, if they see you being somewhat emotional in your responses to that, it's easier for them to discredit what you're saying and say that's emotional. Again, there's a lot of
Yeah.
that's based in like misogyny, based in a lot of other factors with it. But I do think sometimes, unfortunately, she wasn't like you said. She would go on and on and on about something, combine that with being emotional and also not having that trust in the person, it's not a good combination to get your point across and convince them.
Yeah. All right. Well, the fifth rule says players need to pretend to be nice and play the social game. Early in the game, Brittany seemed to be able to talk with different groups and wasn't really involved in the Taylor bashing, seeming to even trying to stop it at times. Um, as we discussed a little while ago, she was even theoretically part of the Girls Alliance, although the difference between theory and reality could come into play here. But things changed quickly for her, especially when she started to spiral, as we discussed already. It not only affected her strategic game, but her social game as well. Um, she clearly wasn't in the in crowd. Although, frankly, who would want to be in the in crowd? That was, the in crowd, they're gone. And that's how she ended up in the leftovers. Um, but even then, she was just never really what I would call a social player. She was nice. She didn't need to pretend. She really was nice. Even in game situations, it was clear to me that she always cared about how she treated other people, at
Yeah,
least until Turner this week. But he earned that. But she just couldn't turn herself into a social butterfly.
I agree. But here's the thing, some people are built a little differently, I'll say.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
like the way and I don't think she ever tried to hide the fact that she was a little bit more quirky. She was, the leftovers were a group of quote unquote outsiders, and she talked about how she didn't really fit the maybe the societal norms in certain ways. I I think people like there's a difference between somebody who tries to fake being something and then it
Mhm.
comes off across as very disingenuous. I feel like even though in sometimes maybe like you said, she didn't really socially connect with some people in certain ways. I think she was given a pass in a lot of ways just because of she accepted her quirkiness. She was how she was
Mhm.
in that way. But again, it does come to play. She was a nice person, and I think here's where it's interesting. Kind of want to discuss because we've talked about with Michael in that situation, but Brittany was also a big factor as well with the whole situation with Kyle bringing it up, and I think that situation, and it's like kind of a gray area. It's like well, we talked about you're damned if you do,
Right.
damned if you don't in that situation. But the result, regardless of it, was that I think some people saw her niceness potentially now as um, I don't want to use the
Game.
word fakeness, but game. Yes. I
Yeah.
think it changed that because we talked about Joseph, right? Where he
Right.
was really nice to people and it seemed super genuine and nothing ever came to question to people to be like, oh man, Joseph did that out of like a game move. And I think unfortunately after she made that move with Michael, it kind of put hindsight rose tinted glasses or the opposite of what rose tinted glasses would be on Brittany's kindness.
Yeah, I debated whether to even bring that up again because we've already talked about it multiple
Mm-hmm.
times, um, and I don't think it played into her loss in particular. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, she was where she was, and yes, it is one reason she lost trust with Monty, for sure, and he brought that up. Um, I still don't think Monty was ever keeping her. I still think he was always trusting Turner more, but who knows? Maybe if that hadn't happened, he would have been more willing to. So, yeah, I mean, it is definitely good to bring up once again to remind us that yeah, she was part of that. If we believe what she and Michael said, it wasn't intentional,
Mm-hmm.
and she was in a slightly different position than Michael because I think she heard it from him a little later. But still, like it or not, that's how it came off as a game move to Monty. So um, now going back to the more general Brittany's social game. I feel like in some ways she's the opposite of Alyssa, who we discussed last week. Alyssa was very social, but couldn't turn anything into game. Brittany was very game oriented, but didn't have the social abilities to do something with it.
That's a really good point. Actually, I actually like that you said that, because I didn't think of it like that. And I think in certain ways that she was like, some people say this player A, B, and C or X, Y, Z, because of their social game, they were able to make this happen. I think in
Mm-hmm.
Brittany's case, it was regardless of their social game, they were able
Yeah,
to make this happen.
despite, yes.
Despite, and I don't mean that in a bad way, because Brittany never pretended to say like that was her place. That was her
Mm-hmm.
key thing. She was a gamer from start to finish, and she tried to employ that in ways. And we talked about with her communication skills in certain ways didn't translate the way you wanted it to be
Right.
for the best game. But I do think that, yeah, I mean, in that point, that she still made things happen despite her social game, and ironically, Alyssa wasn't able to do that. And if they came together, if for whatever reason they actually ever came together to work truly together, they might have been a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, or at least if you could merge them as people, into one person.
Yeah, you just merge them together, and
Yeah, Brit Lissa or
Brit Lissa.
a litany. No, probably not a litany. Brit Lissa. Yes, we needed to have that one person there to handle the
Exactly.
gaming.
I think too, you make a good point that it's within Big Brother, and it's not exactly it's in the rules in certain ways, but not exactly. It's good to have a good foil in the game, right? To have that partner be your partner in the game, but also not completely alike to yourself. Unorthodox relationships and partnerships within the Big Brother house or
Mm-hmm.
any reality game helps you out moving forward. And we saw Michael and Brittany were very like two sides of the same stone in certain ways, and not in everything, but I think it would have helped that, like, if she was able to tie herself to somebody else like Alyssa on another part of the thing. Taylor, she was tied with that as well, which they're very different people, but as they worked in that very close trio, she didn't have that separate person.
Right. Right. So, moving to the sixth rule, it warns against being too much of a threat. Now, back in the first rule, we talked about Brittany's pitch to Monty and also Taylor's pitch to Monty on behalf of Brittany. Um, Most of it was based on the whole idea that Brittany wasn't as big a threat as Turner was. And if you're looking at an individual competition in a vacuum, that's correct. But Monty was looking at the whole picture, and he was right to do so. Monty told Taylor he was most worried about the last comp because it's strictly mental, which is Turner's weak point, but Brittany's strong area. When Brittany spoke directly to Monty, he told her something similar about Turner not being good with the longer term memory tasks. But the most salient point, I think, is that Monty knew if he didn't win final 3 HOH by himself, who's going to take him to the end? If Brittany and Taylor were the other two, they're taking each other. Now Brittany tried to counter that argument by saying, "Oh, but if you're with us, you have a better shot of winning the comp, and rather than against Turner." But again, I don't know that that's necessarily the case, and Monty didn't think so either.
Unfortunately, Brittany suffered from basically what I truly would say is, and it's not always about second place positioning, where she was good enough at these competitions and abilities to do well in them and not really ever be counted out, especially since Big Brother's kind
Mm-hmm.
of moved more to like a more mental, like crapshoot type of competition versus like completely all physical. We saw Brittany do fairly well in these. And while she won a few of them, she came very close to winning a lot more.
Yeah.
And I think when you take numbers on that side of things, it makes it very difficult for someone like Monty to be like, I truly think I can beat you, at the end when it's a competition. We know exactly how this competition is laid out, the specific format. Granted, though, this veto was essentially hers to win. Like, she should have won this competition, this veto competition, but Monty was able to pull it out.
Yeah, she had that one day wrong. She had day 3 instead of day 4 or 4 instead of 3. I don't remember which. And
Tough.
apparently Michael confirmed to her that she had the right day. So, the big debate is, did Michael do that on purpose just in case he was
Oh,
facing her at the end? Um, I,
That's
I,
such a
I tend I tend to think not, but maybe. Um,
that's
but
so interesting.
yeah, but when you look at uh, the rest of the overall picture, um, Brittany also tried to convince Monty that he'd lose to Turner at the end, even if his chance of making it there was 100%. Maybe Brittany really did believe that. I seem to think she did, but it's just not true. They're not seeing things. It's like almost everyone on the outside is like Turner is dead. He has no chance. And on the inside, Brittany's like, Turner's gonna take it all. And it's just such a difference, from being on the outside to being on the inside. I mean, yes, it was also advantageous for her to say that, but she really did seem to believe it. But it's just not true.
Yeah, I mean, you have to pitch whatever way you can, right? You have to try to figure out a way to do that. I think what I think she could have hounded a little bit more on is her distrust. If she could kind of explain her distrust of the other players to lessen her threat level. I think here's the thing: is comparing herself like you're going to beat me more. Like that argument might not even work on Monty very much, who kind of firmly believes that he probably could beat anybody in that
Mm-hmm.
house right now. I'm not saying that's true or not, but
Right.
it's like, oh, okay, you could offer me that, but like everyone can offer me that because I'm gonna win, you know. And I think there's also the fear that
Uh,
like how like she was like Michael's right hand lieutenant in a
yeah.
way. So how many of actions that he's not in the house, she's not in there. The belief that maybe also she has a guaranteed vote in Michael being as close to as they were prior to that one part.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a hard argument to make.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we can go to the seventh rule, which says not to trust anybody, pretty much. Um, we all know that Brittany trusted Michael 100%. In fact, she trusted him so much that she was shocked when he threw everything he had at the wall, or at her, in his attempt to survive the double eviction, even though that meant possibly hurting her game down the line. She trusted him so much that when she won the veto, even after all that happened, she shouted out, "This is for you, Michael," which still doesn't make sense to me. Now, in the end, was it that trust that did her in? Not directly, because it's someone she never trusted who got rid of her. But putting all her trust in one basket led to a situation where she hadn't built up enough trust with anyone else except Taylor. And even Taylor couldn't get Monty to change his mind.
Yeah, it's she put a lot of trust into Michael, and I think the issue is that what hindered her, because what we saw kind of spiral a little bit, is that she left so much of her game identity into Michael, and she's such a gamer that Michael will recognize her as a player and thought that the most rational thing, and maybe he's a why blank lost listener, but the most rational thing is don't trust anybody or don't trust them to a huge extent like that.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't ever think that Brittany would ever sacrifice her game for him. So he needed to keep her at arm's distance. And as he did that near the end game, that continually hindered Brittany's game because for so long she was trusting him throughout the first pre-jury phase, and now going into this jury phase, she continued that same level of trust into him without having kind of the side eye. So when she did fall flat on her face in certain situations, it really hit her a lot harder than it should.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we can move into the Appendix A, which deals with the jury phase of the game. And it's about how players need to plan ahead for making it to Final Two and how they should work the jury. Brittany already knew that if she made it to the end, she was getting second place unless maybe she had somehow gotten there with Alyssa. And, she seemed okay with that because even second place money would significantly help in starting her family. But she also did things that put her in the position where she really couldn't win. Her jury management, I'm sorry, was simply atrocious. And this topic builds off of what we've said before regarding her trying to talk strategy to people. When both Indy and Jasmine were about to leave, Brittany spoke to each of them about the terrible things they'd done and the lies they'd told, as reasons/excuses for why they were getting voted out when they thought they were safe. Brittany jumped into that lead role, and the others let her. She's like, "Well, I want to talk to them." They're like, "Okay." Um, I think she was trying to make them feel like they had gotten themselves evicted, so they shouldn't blame her and the others. But making someone feel bad on their way out the door is never going to go your way. She just made them angry at her instead. And she tanked whatever chances she might have had with those two if she made it to the end.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, here's the thing: is we've talked about a very common theme throughout the game is sinking ships. I always say it wrong. Brittany did a really good job of actually making sure she wasn't on a shipping sink, and she kind of jumped around when she needed to. Unfortunately, though, um, you need help to have other ships around you, and she started sinking other people's ships at the end.
You
And so,
sank my battleship.
exactly, and so then she was left alone with no one to help move the ship except herself, and that's what happens.
Yeah. Now, as for the others, in terms of Brittany's vote, it's clear she will be voting for Taylor to win if Taylor's in the final two.
Hmm.
And she will be actively campaigning to others to do the same. Although I don't think she goes to the jury house. I think she's just going to stroll into the round table or whatever version they have. Um, and so I think she has grand ideas about how she's going to convince people, and she's only going to have this one small contained time frame to do it, really. Um, but that's fine. Hopefully, maybe she can. If it comes down to Monty versus Turner at the end, I'm not entirely sure who she's more angry at right now. I think she would actually vote for Turner to win.
Wow. Okay. I mean, here's the thing: is I'm not really surprised either way. Because I think it could go both ways in there. A few things. Yes, I think she is. She's probably thinking she has more sway in the jury potentially than she does. I mean, she left the house seeming a little bitter, so we'll see how that translates into into the jury house or the jury portion.
Yeah.
Um, and here's the thing: is she has some unresolved like beef kind of with Michael, so I'm interested to see if that kind of bleeds into what we see and
Yeah.
makes her not able to want make the right decision, not the right decision, but the most logical decision that she normally would if she wasn't
Hmm.
feeling the way she was feeling. So then we come down to Monty and Turner. Who does she feel less betrayed by or more betrayed? She might feel honestly a little sympathetic towards Turner in certain ways because she had to throw the lie at him that didn't ultimately work. So she feels maybe he's vindicated to be actually treat her in a certain way versus Monty, who was the reason that got her out of the game. So,
I just also feel like she said, I mean, she wasn't happy with the way Monty treated her,
mhm.
last week, where he like lectured her like a misbehaving schoolgirl for a couple of
Yeah,
hours. He claimed to be playing a clean game while he was lying. He got mad at her for suggesting that he and Turner were working together when he and Turner were working together. Um, so I think she's just had it up to here with Monty.
I agree. And I think my only worry, and this we'll have to talk about on the line when we cover the finale,
Mm,
because we know he'll be in the final three, is I think though this bled onto Brittany. I've seen that Monty is very cool and collected, very calm like water throughout the season. But I feel like in this last final segment, in this last final five or so, he's been having a bit of hubris that has been coming upon him that I think other house guests are really kind of seeing, and I don't want to say the level of entitlement that he's feeling because I don't know it goes that strong, but I think players are feeling like he thinks he has this in the bag if he gets to the final three, that he feels like his game is better. I'm not saying it isn't. I think he's actually played a really strong game. I do think it's
mhm.
debatable that he will win all outright against anybody. I think it actually it's anybody's game to take. But yeah, I think because of that, you never really want to reward somebody who has hubris, regardless if they're
Right.
right, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. All right. Well, it is about time to wrap things up. What are your final thoughts about Brittany?
You know what? I can say confidently, I did not imagine Brittany making it to this far, to Final Four, especially after those first 2 weeks. I think Brittany is a above average player for sure. I think anybody who argues that Brittany has played a subpar game or for second place, a lot of players don't even ever make it to second place. And yet she talked about trying to make it to the end with Michael. Who knows if she really would have done it? She figured out the lane she needed to do. And keep in mind that when you walk into that Big Brother house, not everyone is given the same opportunities as one another. You roll your dice, and that's how it happens sometimes. We saw Brittany in those first 2 weeks find herself kind of sidelined, figuring out what she needs to do. Didn't think she would even make it past pre-jury portion, was able to fight her way, figure out a way to do it. Yes, her communication skills, her emotional responses to certain things, and her ability to trust a little too much in certain people all kind of fell into her demise, into why she was ultimately evicted. But overall, I thoroughly thought Brittany was a fun character and person to watch on the season and the way she played. I think she added a level of energy into it. And then there was a level of not exact chaos, but controlled chaos when Brittany was thrown in the realm. So I enjoyed watching her. Unfortunately, she had to be evicted, and for all the reasons we've already listed above, I think that's why Brittany went home. Went to the jury home.
Yeah. I know that I've come down hard on my winner pick, Brittany, as I mentioned earlier, but I really do like her. I wish she could have found a way to stick around. She made it to the Final Four, but she couldn't seal the deal. She had a couple very close comp losses near the end that would have completely changed the end of the game. But a major part of these rules is to put yourself in a position where you don't need to win every close comp. On Monday, when Brittany realized her fate was sealed, she talked to the cameras a bit, and she said she would do so many things different if she could play again. She wouldn't lie as much. She would be more confident. She would trust herself, and she would have fun. The first three of those things were directly related to the rules we discussed, and I think the fourth would have come more naturally if she hadn't put so much pressure on herself, which I recognize is a difficult thing to do in this situation. Brittany had tied herself to Michael early and didn't have nearly as much of a relationship to the others in the house besides Taylor. A big part of that was just that Brittany had a different way of communicating with people. As I said, I've seen this sort of thing at my old job. One person thinks in boxes and explains everything that way. Another thinks in dodecahedrons and expects everyone else to do likewise. Some people just aren't meant to communicate very well with each other. So many times when she tried, things went sideways. Brittany just was not able to explain herself in a convincing way that didn't seem like she was hiding something or lying or purposely trying to confuse things, even when she wasn't. As I said earlier, she was like the opposite of Alyssa in that she often had good game understanding, but didn't have the social agility to put it into use. Even when she was right, it was difficult to convince people. And when she was trying to make a sneakier game move or lying, it ended up being almost impossible for her. And that is why Brittany lost.
Well put. Well put.
Thank you. So, before we continue into our predictions, let me remind everyone that the rules, or the Survivor version of the rules that we just discussed, are available on Poster and Poster t-shirt and Checklist t-shirt and Checklist mug. Just go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed. You can prepare for the Survivor season if you get those orders in quickly here.
And don't forget that both of us are very active on several social media platforms where we discuss Big Brother and a number of other topics, which will be Survivor and Amazing Race to come. On Twitter, I'm at DOV Kabir and Dave is at David Bloomberg. We're both on TikTok where I am at Basmati Boy and our residential TikTok influencer is at David_Bloomberg. Recently, I think with the premiere of Survivor, you just put out some coverage on there. So go check that out on there because it's great. I love it. An Amazing Race is on right now too. So those are things that are going to be covered. We're both on Instagram, where David is at david.e.bloomberg, and he puts all his TikTok videos over on his Instagram, as well as I am at Ovi Kabir. Throughout this whole Big Brother season, we've had such a blast interacting with you guys through our DMs, talking about why Blink lost, or just Big Brother in general. So please feel free to reach out. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We always love when you talk about what you're thinking, especially about the show. We're coming to the end, so let us know who your final predictions are, and I feel like that'll be a good segue into this last final part.
Yes. So we, because we were able to get this podcast in, we have the opportunity to update our predictions. I don't know if they will be updated, but we have the opportunity. In the Why Alyssa Lost podcast, I had predicted Brittany would be voted out if Monty or Turner won, so that was at least correct. Although, wasn't quite at the same level as like predicting the correct lottery numbers there. So now the question is, who will take whom to the end? I think Monty has been honest with Taylor in saying he will bring her to final two, and he hasn't said the same thing to Turner. I think Taylor is worried that she will lose to either Monty or Turner, and she has settled on bringing Monty. And I don't think there was ever a doubt. Well, I say that. It seemed like there wasn't a doubt Turner would bring Monty. Although I think as the end of this week has been going on, I do feel like Turner maybe, not so set on that anymore. And we know he has certainly lied before.
Yeah, I don't know. This is one of those things just where you just like lay in bed and you're just like thinking like, I wonder like what ways it could go. And I feel like this is a really interesting final three, which I'm really happy about. That in any combination of this three, I think there's an argument for either any of them to win. Again, each person might have a little bit more sway one way or the other. I know fans seem to think so. But what I will say is that it's been a long time since we've had a final three where each player has a very solid resume. Talk about HOH wins, competition wins, social game, a lot to pull from that don't fully intersect with one each other. I feel like they're all very different games in certain ways. Yes, I think Monty probably brings Turner, or excuse me, brings Taylor.
Oh my God! Okay, you had me surprised for a minute there.
But I do think there's a world where he considers it, if he kind of gives her more credit, that that he should probably take Turner. I feel like one thing that's popping out. Yeah,
he should, but he doesn't give her credit. I mean, just the way, I don't know if it's his ongoing misogyny, the fact that he thinks he knows her better than she knows herself, whatever, which is kind of part of the misogyny. I think he just doesn't see her as having a game.
That's the issue, and I think that's the thing. And here's the thing: is I don't think by any means when I say he should bring Taylor, or he should bring Turner. Sorry, I'm getting my words mixed up. Right. The reason I don't think Turner's played a bad game by any means. I actually think I think Turner has a really good argument potentially against Taylor and potentially against Monty. I think Monty is worried that Turner has taken out some big people, from Kyle to Amira to Michael, essentially. Yes, all three of those. And again, we can argue what control he had over those weeks, which I think a lot of people will talk about. But within the house, within the Big Brother house, they know Turner has made those moves. Turner has a lot of people on the jury too. But Taylor also is a vote most likely for Monty if he cuts her. So, but then here's the situation. Does Taylor have she's set on taking Monty, but do you feel like she has a better chance against Turner versus Monty? Do you feel like Monty is...
I think Turner loses to anyone, but
okay.
I do think we have to remember what we see versus what they see. And I'm reminded of this because of how certain Brittany was that Turner would win. I mean, if this were Survivor and they were going to have a 2-3 hour final tribal council with lots of discussion, then Monty or Taylor would have the opportunity to bring up and explain, yes, it appeared Turner made those big moves, but in that double eviction, when you were voted out, Michael, Monty, had to be the one to convince Turner that it was okay for me to use the veto so that you could be put up and gone. When it came to Kyle, we know it wasn't Turner's idea. The whole house basically came to the conclusion it had to be done. When it came to Amira, it wasn't Turner's idea to create the leftovers. Someone needs to lay that out. I don't know that the jury has had that laid out for them. I mean, I don't want to underestimate the jury, but I also don't want to overestimate what they know.
Yeah,
From
no, I
my
mean,
point of view, they should know enough to not give the game to Turner.
and it's going to be who can convince them otherwise, because Turner can stand there and say, hey, you know what, yes, was it difficult to take you out, Michael, because we had a bond, we had a relationship within the house that kind of went exceeded from game, and you know that. But that's why it was so difficult to vote you. But I knew in my heart of hearts I had to do it, regardless of Monty winning it. I won HOH, and I had the ability to do what I needed to do. When it came to Kyle, was it difficult for my game? Yes, because it wasn't the best game for me, but I took the moral high ground and did the decision because I'm HOH. No one had to take that blood to do that. And then with Amira, so I feel like within the time they have, Turner can convince them much easier than someone could convince otherwise that it wasn't Turner's moves that he actually took those HOH. It's like clear cut and blank. When you write the check, it's going to be Turner's name on it that he sent this person home. So again, like if this was Survivor, where there's a 3-hour session where we can dissect it, I think the person who's going to have the hardest, unless like people in the Big Brother house have been doing the groundwork, is going to be Taylor. Actually, I think her social game is really great. I think everything we've seen is really good, but we're seeing fans fight online of whether Taylor actually legitimately did stuff and legitimately didn't do things. I mean, even in our comments, and I'm not saying
most of those fans. Well, yeah,
but no, I mean, I agree. I agree with you. I think they're bad opinions. But since there's such a disagreement with that, I wonder if it won't be so clear and cut from the jury's point of view, because they won't have time to be convinced one way or the other, versus Monty and Turner's clear cut ones. I think it really is going to come down to who wins these final parts and who brings who.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Looking at the breakdown of the pairings, I think Taylor beats Turner quite handily.
Okay.
I just don't think she'll realize it and take him to the end. So I don't think we'll ever see that pairing. But I think she, I mean, looking at who she has Brittany. She probably has Joseph. She probably has Michael. Um, and so that's 3 right off the bat. Jasmine isn't going to vote for Turner. Indy probably isn't going to vote for Turner. So right there, you've got the majority, no matter what. Terrence is never voting for Taylor no matter what. I mean, it could be Taylor versus Satan, and Terrence is voting for Satan. So, of course, he probably thinks Taylor is Satan. So, cloning situation there. But
that's the tough thing. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm just kind of going on, So that's my thought of that particular pairing.
I mean, it is one of those things I think we could discuss basically all day with this one. But what I will say is that, yeah, we have Kyle, Alyssa, Terrence, who I think will find their way back in Turner's camp in some shape or form. I don't think Michael and Brittany are vehemently for Taylor versus Turner in this situation. The reason being is that I feel like Michael in some shape or form will respect Turner being the one to take him out in double eviction. Like, I was a beast of a person, and the only person who could get me out was Turner. And I'm not saying that they're diminishing Taylor's game by that. I do think, though, that could be a potential they take. I think Brittany might feel like Turner also is there. So I other than Jasmine being a complete vote against Turner, I can still see Indy in some shape or form find a way to somebody else other than Taylor. I think those votes are more up for the grabs than we think they are.
I mean, some might be. I don't think there's any world in which Brittany votes for Turner over Taylor.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think Alyssa votes for Turner after what he did and the way he lied to her flat out that whole time. So I just, yeah, I think Taylor wins handily over Turner.
Yeah.
For Monty and Taylor, I think that's the tight one. I still think she would pull it out. It just, I said last time it comes down to how the early jurors feel. Monty will certainly have Turner. He will certainly have
Mhm.
Terrence. I think he would probably have Kyle.
Mhm.
I believe, as I said before, Taylor would have Brittany, Joseph, probably Michael, almost certainly Alyssa. It's those others that I'm just not
Do we
sure
think
about.
though for sure that Joseph wouldn't go for Monty versus Taylor because they had such
I
a
don't
good
know.
bond too.
I don't think we know it for sure,
Yeah.
but I think that I think he was closer to her than Monty, and I think he will vote based on that.
That's what I'm not sure because like here's the thing is that I think that they're so yes he did have those feelings but they never if they go on some form of like a showmance that actually actualize I think that would be one thing but I think that he was so close to both strategically and personally to Monty and even at the I think we gotta keep in mind that I think people have been saying that we're gonna see Joseph vote emotionally or like feel Joseph at the end of the day is a lawyer as well so I do think he will be able to the same way as Michael break down the game and see who he believes is best. And that's why, and I'm not saying Monty
Yeah,
has
but
done that better than Taylor, but I do think he might be more methodical than we're giving him credit for.
yeah, but he's also not a huge super fan. So he's not used to breaking down the game that way. And remember, he was the one who sparked the rebellion against the ruling class in the House because of Taylor.
Yeah,
So doesn't that in some way continue his story,
yeah, no,
by helping Taylor to win?
it's a good point. Yeah, and it's a good point. But here's the thing: is that I don't see Indy voting for Taylor over Monty. I feel like the girls, Jasmine, and them. And here's the thing: is that this is a big
But
conversation that's
wasn't
been
wasn't Monty the HOH when Indy went out?
I think so, but I feel I'm trying to think. Indy went out. She was the first jury member. Was it him? I'd have to go. I think so,
I
though.
can't remember for sure, but
You're
I
right.
I I, I believe that she blamed him at least in
She
part.
could. Yeah. I don't know. That's the fun thing. I think it'd be a really fun way to see it either way. I don't. What I'm happy about is that I truly don't think. I know people will be disappointed, but I won't be disappointed who wins this final because I think they're all deserving in a different way. Of course, like yeah, I think it's exciting to have the ability to have this conversation where it's basically a three-way in my mind and a tie with few up and downs.
Yeah. Let me get to that in a moment, but want to just at least quickly address the Monty versus Turner final two. I still think Monty easily wins that, as I did before, which is one reason he doesn't care about going to the end with Turner
Mm-hmm.
instead of Brittany. I I think people will look at those two and say, yeah, Turner had some wins, but Monty was more the driving force.
I don't think it's as clear as cut as that, to be honest. That's just my opinion from the way the jury will see it.
Mhm.
I think the jury sees Turner as a much more viable candidate to win it than maybe us on the outside are giving him credit for. But
And
maybe I'm a
that's
little too
possible.
high. We'll see. We'll
Yeah.
see.
Yeah. We could all be disappointed. I mean, I think you said so here's what I think will happen. I
Okay.
think the finale will end up with Monty winning HOH, taking Taylor to the end and losing to her. Or at least
Mhm.
I'm hoping that last part. Um, I don't if you had asked me a couple weeks ago, am I okay with any of these three winning? Yeah. The way Monty has been treating Taylor, I want her to beat him. Not just for her benefit, but just because it would just dig right into Mr. Know-it-all there, who has just been mistreating her. And I also don't like the way Turner has been acting. Now, are those very, more personal reasons? Yeah. But from a game standpoint, also, Taylor has been through a lot. And
Mhm.
and she's survived it. She's gone through it. So I would have no problem with a Why Taylor Won podcast. And that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, no, I mean, hey, Taylor was my winner pick from the get
Yes.
go. I want more than nothing for her to win to validate me one, but also I think it's we're really seeing like the Prince and the Pauper story in the sense that like she started from the very as low as you could get in this Big Brother
Mhm.
game from the first week to being the target, and to see her get to this is such a cool story. But you see people in the driving force from the very beginning, like Monty. So now, who has played essentially a bigger, better game? Um, my prediction is that I actually think Turner wins the final three, and
Okay.
I think he brings Taylor with him.
Wow.
And I think Taylor wins in that situation. I think it's gonna be a split decision, though. I think it's gonna be a split decision. Um, but I don't think we see Monty in the final. We'll see if I'm wrong.
Okay. All right. Well, the next time the two of us get together to talk, we will see who was right, and it'll be a Y blank one podcast, probably a
Uh-huh.
couple days after the finale, depending on our schedules, when we will discuss the games of all three finalists. Before then, I will have the first Y blank Lost podcast of Survivor 43 with Jessica Lewis, featuring Tiffany Seeley and Dr. David Voce as our guests. Um, so as we wrap up, I want to encourage people to check out the RHAP patron program at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Even as we move into Survivor, there's special patron only podcasts for Survivor. And there's, the Facebook groups, Discord, everything you could ever want. So check that out at robhasawebsite.com/patron, or click on the link at robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed. Also, make sure you're subscribed to all the RHAP podcasts by going to our YX Lost feed page. You'll find great content as we transition out of Big Brother into Survivor, Amazing Race, and various other shows. Also, since it is the start of many of those new reality TV seasons, from now until the end of September, for every new follower, for every new subscriber of RHAP, Rob will donate $2 to the Boys and Girls Club. Subscribing is free, and you'll be supporting a great cause. Rob and Nicole selected the Boys and Girls Club, whose goal it is to provide safe spaces, life-enhancing programs, and mentorship to help support and empower all kids to live up to their full potential. If you've already subscribed, recommend it to a friend. Borrow your grandpa's iPad. Listeners can visit robhasawebsite.com/subscribe and to get the main feed plus individual shows, the whole Survivor, the whole Big Brother, whatever you want. So again, do that. And, like I said, also goes to a donation. With that, thanks to Scott St. Pierre for the editing done on this podcast, and to Will for America for the theme song. And thanks, of course, to you, Ovi, for once again joining me, making time in your vacation schedule in order to make this happen.
Happy to always make it happen. Thanks for everyone for watching, and cannot wait to cover what happens on this finale soon enough. So see
All
y'all
right.
soon.
We will see everyone soon. Bye.